500 people invaded my ranch at dawn. By 9:30 a.m., they were trapped behind locked gates, begging me to let them leave. My HOA president sold camping tickets to my private land for $75 each, then laughed when I said no. What's some old rancher gonna do? Sue us? Big mistake. What she didn't know was that every car had to cross my property to get out. And after 20 years building military infrastructure, I knew exactly how to control that access. One remote control, one satisfying click. 500 trespassers suddenly learning what private property means. The look on Chelsea's face when she realized what I'd done? Priceless. But what happened when I showed the EPA agents what she'd been dumping in my creek for months? Well, that's when her little festival became something much bigger. What would you do if someone sold your backyard to strangers? Where are you watching from? I'm Wade Garrison, and 3 months ago I thought I'd found paradise. 80 acres of Texas hill country, complete with a creek that runs year-round and enough mesquite trees to keep a man busy for decades. The smell of cedar and morning coffee from my porch. That was supposed to be my retirement plan after 20 years as an Army Corps engineer. What I didn't know was that my slice of heaven came with a catch. The only access road to Willowbrook Estates, a gated community of million-dollar McMansions, cuts right through my property. The previous owner had some handshake agreement from the 1990s, but when I bought the place, nobody mentioned I'd be playing traffic cop for 200 entitled neighbors. Enter Chelsea Vanderbilt, yes, that's really her name, HOA president and professional pain in my backside. Picture someone who irons her jeans and considers Starbucks roughing it. Chelsea inherited her money, spent 2 summers at a dude ranch, and now considers herself a country lifestyle expert. The first time we met, she knocked on my door wearing white pants and heels, complaining about the dust problem from my gravel driveway. You could smell her expensive perfume mixing with the natural cedar scent that I'd grown to love. The second time, she brought a petition signed by 40 neighbors demanding I pave my road for their convenience. The third time, she threatened to sue me because my rooster was disrupting the peaceful enjoyment of their $2,000 a month HOA fees. But Chelsea's real specialty was finding new ways to use my property without asking. First, it was cutting through my pasture to check their mailboxes faster. Then it was parking overflow guests on my land during their pool parties. Each time I'd ask them to stop, Chelsea would smile that tight little smile and mention how neighborly cooperation makes everyone's property values go up. See, here's what Chelsea didn't understand. I'd spent 20 years building bridges in places where one mistake could kill your whole unit. I learned to solve problems methodically, quietly, and permanently. I also learned that bullies only understand one language: consequences. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was welding a new gate for my workshop when I heard car doors slamming. Lots of car doors. I walked outside to find Chelsea directing a crew of contractors dumping gravel on my property. Not near the road, but on my actual pasture where I graze cattle. "Wade," she called out, waving like we were old friends. "Great news! The county approved our community beautification project. We're extending the decorative stone pathway all the way to the main road." On my land. Well, technically it's an easement improvement. Our lawyer says it's perfectly legal under rural development statutes. I could smell the fresh diesel fuel from their equipment mixing with the dust they were kicking up. The sound of gravel hitting metal rang like gunshots across my peaceful valley. Chelsea was standing there in her pristine white outfit, directing workers to dump rocks on land I'd spent 3 years restoring, while explaining how this was actually good for me. Think about the property value increase, Wade. Once we establish the pathway, your land becomes part of our community aesthetic. That's worth thousands in appreciation. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of the work, probably for another Facebook post about community improvement projects that would make her look like a visionary leader to her social media followers. "You'll want to move your cattle to the back pasture while we finish the stonework. Can't have livestock interfering with the installation." That's when I knew Chelsea Vanderbilt had just made the biggest mistake of her pampered life. She'd picked a fight with the wrong engineer, and she was about to learn exactly what happens when you assume someone else's property is yours to control. The very next morning, I discovered Chelsea's true genius while drinking coffee and scrolling through Facebook. Posted on the Willowbrook Estates page, "Mountain Music Festival, May 15th, 500 camping spots available on beautiful private ranch. $75 per tent site includes parking access to natural creek, and authentic Texas hill country experience. The pictures showed my property, my creek, my meadow where I'd been planning to plant wildflowers for the bees. My cattle were featured prominently, described as authentic ranch livestock, providing educational opportunities for urban families. I screenshot everything and called Chelsea immediately. Wade, perfect timing. I was just about to swing by with your vendor agreement. My what now? Oh, don't worry about the paperwork. Since your land is part of our community access easement, the HOA board voted to include it in our annual fundraising events. Think of all the exposure you'll get for your little farming hobby. The casual way she said little farming hobby made my jaw clench. This was 70-year-old soil that my grandfather would have killed for, and she was treating it like a photo opportunity. Chelsea, you need to cancel that event, today. I'm afraid that's impossible. We already have 200 reservations and deposits. Besides, our lawyer reviewed the legal requirements. Rural properties that benefit from community infrastructure have certain obligations to support local commerce. I'd been in enough firefights to recognize when someone was shooting blanks. What lawyer? Martin Brewster from Brewster and Associates. He specializes in property development law. I could have him give you a call to explain the details. After we hung up, I did what any suspicious engineer would do. I researched Martin Brewster. Turns out he existed all right. Family law attorney, divorce and custody specialist, about as qualified to interpret property easement law as Chelsea was to run cattle. But here's where Chelsea made her first tactical error. She assumed I was just another confused old rancher who'd roll over for legal-sounding threats. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 3 tours reading contracts in places where getting the details wrong meant people died. I drove to the county courthouse and requested every document related to my property going back to 1970. Cost me $47 and 4 hours of reading, but I found something interesting. The original easement agreement specifically stated residential access only and required renewal every 20 years. When was the last renewal? Never. When did the current easement expire? December 31st, 2019. Chelsea's community had been trespassing on my land for 4 years. Here's a knowledge nugget about easement law that every property owner should know. Easements don't automatically renew themselves. They're legal contracts with specific terms and expiration dates. When an easement expires without proper renewal, the property owner's rights are fully restored. Translation: just because someone used your land before doesn't mean they can use it forever. I made copies of everything, then stopped by my neighbor Lou's place. Lou Hendricks had been sheriff for 32 years before retiring, and we'd become friends over morning coffee and shared complaints about city folks moving to the country. Wade, what's got you looking like you ate a sour pickle? I showed him the documents and Chelsea's Facebook post. Lou let out a long, low whistle that echoed across his front porch. Son, you've got yourself a genuine legal slam dunk here. That woman's been selling tickets to trespass on your property. What's the best way to handle this? Legally? Send a certified letter demanding she cancel the event. Give her 10 days to respond. After that, Lou grinned. After that, it becomes a law enforcement matter. And if she doesn't cancel? Well, that depends how creative you want to get with your property rights. I spent that evening drafting a letter that was polite, professional, and absolutely crystal clear. Cancel the event, refund the deposits, and remove all promotional materials mentioning my property within 10 business days. I cited the expired easement, the lack of permission, and the legal definition of trespassing. I even offered to discuss a proper rental agreement if she wanted to hold future events legally. Chelsea's response came via text message the next morning. Spoke with our lawyer. You can't deny community access for petty personal reasons. Festival proceeds as planned. Stop being difficult. That night, I sat on my porch listening to the creek babble and sketching designs in my engineering notebook. The taste of cedar smoke from my fireplace mixed with the night air as I finalized my plans. 20 years of building tactical solutions had taught me one important principle. When someone refuses to listen to words, sometimes you have to speak in metal and concrete. Chelsea wanted a festival on my land. She was about to get exactly what she asked for, with a few modifications she wasn't expecting. 2 weeks after my certified letter, Chelsea escalated to what I call suburban warfare. She hired an actual attorney, not the divorce guy, but someone from Austin, who specialized in property disputes. His letter arrived on heavyweight paper with gold embossing, threatening to sue me for restraint of trade and interference with lawful business activities. But Chelsea's real strategy was character assassination, and she was surprisingly good at it. It started with whispers at the feed store. Poor old Wade's gotten paranoid since his wife died. Then it moved to the coffee shop. He's been drinking too much, making up stories about people stealing his land. By week 2, the rumors had evolved into full-blown fiction. Wade threatened to shoot festival goers with his army rifle. The wife comment was a low blow. Sarah had died in a car accident 8 years ago, and buying this ranch was supposed to be our retirement dream together. Chelsea somehow found out about my loss and weaponized my grief like a professional. But the drinking accusation was pure genius. I'd been sober for 15 years, another thing the Army taught me. But in a small Texas town, once that rumor starts circulating, people start watching for proof. Every time I bought groceries, I could feel eyes tracking whether I headed toward the beer aisle. The breaking point came at Henderson's Hardware, where I'd been shopping for 20 years. I needed bolts for a project and found myself face-to-face with Jake Henderson behind the counter. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings filled the air as he looked at me with obvious discomfort. "Wade, I heard about the trouble with the HOA folks. Nothing I can't handle, Jake. Look, I've known you since you moved here, and you've always been straight with me. But Chelsea Vanderbilt came by yesterday asking questions about your state of mind." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you'd been buying unusual amounts of hardware, whether you seemed agitated, whether I thought you might be unstable." His weathered hands drummed nervously on the counter. "She also mentioned that her lawyer might need character witnesses if things go to court. Said it would be a real shame if local businesses got dragged into a legal mess." The message was clear. Cooperate with Chelsea's narrative, or face mysterious problems with permits, inspections, and community support. "What did you tell her, Jake?" "Told her to go pound sand. But Wade, not everyone's going to have the backbone to stand up to that woman. She's got money and connections, and folks around here don't like making waves." That afternoon, I drove to Austin and consulted with my own attorney, Rebecca Santos, who'd helped me with the ranch purchase. She reviewed Chelsea's legal threats and started laughing. "Wade, this is amateur hour. Her lawyer's threatening to sue you for restraint of trade? You can't restrain trade and trespassing. That's not a legal business activity." "So I'm in the clear?" "More than clear. If anything, you could sue them for defamation, trespassing, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But here's what I'd recommend instead." Rebecca pulled out a fresh legal pad and started sketching a strategy. "We file a preemptive injunction against the festival. Force them to prove their legal right to use your property. When they can't produce valid easement documents, the court shuts down their event for them. How long would that take? 2 weeks, maybe 3? Festivals in 10 days. Then we expedite. But Wade, there's something else you should know. I ran a background check on Chelsea Vanderbilt. Turns out this isn't her first rodeo." Rebecca slid a folder across the desk containing newspaper clippings from Colorado, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Same pattern. Chelsea would move into rural communities, stir up property disputes, then flip her own real estate investments when land values shifted. She's done this before? 4 times in 8 years. Always targets properties with unclear easement rights. Always starts with community events that establish usage patterns. Always ends with legal pressure forcing original landowners to sell. The taste of coffee and revelation filled my mouth as the bigger picture emerged. This wasn't about a music festival. This was about stealing my ranch, one legal precedent at a time. "Rebecca, what happens if someone's holding a festival on private property and the landowner decides to modify access during the event?" She raised an eyebrow. "Depends what kind of modifications you're talking about." "Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically, a property owner has absolute right to control access to his land. As long as he's not creating immediate physical danger to people, he can lock gates, change codes, or restrict entry at any time. Even if people are already on the property. Especially then, trespassing doesn't become legal just because you've already started doing it." Here's a knowledge nugget about property law. Once a property owner withdraws permission for access, continued presence becomes criminal trespassing, regardless of any money paid or prior arrangements made without the owner's consent. Translation: even if someone paid Chelsea for camping spots, they're still trespassing on my land without my permission. I drove home with a new understanding. Chelsea wasn't just stealing my land. She was betting I wouldn't have the engineering skills or legal backbone to stop her. She was about to lose that bet. Chelsea's third escalation was pure psychological warfare. She organized what she called community safety patrols around my property. Every morning at 7 a.m. and every evening at 6 p.m., a convoy of 3 white SUVs would slowly drive past my gate, occupants taking pictures and making notes on clipboards like they were conducting official surveillance. The morning after the patrols started, I found fresh tire tracks circling my workshop. Someone had driven through my pasture at night, getting close enough to my house to count windows. The grass was still bent from their tires, and I could smell exhaust fumes lingering in the morning air like an unwelcome visitor had marked their territory. Lou Hendricks came by that afternoon with disturbing news from his wife's bunco group. "Wade, you need to know what's happening at the coffee shop. Chelsea's been holding informal meetings, calling them neighborhood safety discussions. She's telling folks you've been making threats." "What kind of threats?" "Booby traps, violence against festival goers. She's even got pictures." Lou handed me his phone showing Facebook posts from Chelsea's personal account. There was my gate, which I'd reinforced with steel posts and an electronic lock, photographed from multiple angles. The captions read, "Concerning escalation in defensive preparations," and "Is this the behavior of someone planning peaceful coexistence?" What made me sick was seeing neighbors I'd known for years hitting the concerned emoji on her posts. People who'd borrowed my tools, asked for help fixing tractors, shared morning coffee, and complaints about city politics, now viewing me through Chelsea's lens of manufactured fear. "Lou, this is character assassination." Gets worse. She's filed formal complaints with county code enforcement about unauthorized fortifications and potential safety hazards. Inspectors coming out Thursday. That Thursday, I waited on my porch as Code Enforcement Officer Dave Martinez walked the perimeter of my property with Chelsea trailing behind, pointing at various features of my ranch like a prosecutor presenting evidence. The sound of their footsteps on gravel mixed with Chelsea's rapid-fire commentary about escalating defensive measures. My crime? Installing a proper security gate, legal, reinforcing fence posts with concrete, legal, and posting clearly visible no trespassing signs every 50 feet, also legal. "Mr. Garrison," Dave said after completing his inspection, "I don't see any code violations here. Your gate meets all safety requirements, and property owners have the right to secure their land." Chelsea's face flushed red. "What about the metal spikes on the fence posts? Those are standard anti-climbing deterrents, perfectly legal on private property. The electronic lock system? Also legal. Mr. Garrison, you'll need to maintain emergency access for fire department vehicles, but I assume you've got that covered." I showed him the emergency override system I'd installed, a simple keypad that EMS could use if needed. Dave nodded approval and closed his clipboard. After he left, Chelsea lingered by her car, staring at my gate with unconcealed hatred. I could smell her expensive perfume mixing with dust and diesel exhaust as she made one final attempt at intimidation. "Wade, you're making this much harder than it needs to be. We have 347 confirmed reservations now. People have made vacation plans, booked time off work. When this festival happens, and it will happen, everyone's going to remember who tried to destroy their good time. Chelsea, let me make something clear. That festival isn't happening on my land. Period." She climbed into her pristine white Mercedes SUV, but instead of leaving, she pulled out her phone and started making calls. I could hear fragments through her open window. Need the media contact list, and small-town bullying story, and veteran with mental health issues. That night, I found Chelsea's latest Facebook post, a heartfelt appeal about a troubled neighbor who was threatening families with children over imaginary property rights. The post had been shared 43 times in 6 hours, spreading her version of events across social media like wildfire. But Chelsea made one crucial mistake in her campaign. She underestimated small-town networks. Lou called me at 9 p.m. with intelligence from his wife's bunco group. "Wade, you got friends you don't even know about. Martha Fleming's daughter is a paralegal in Austin. She says Chelsea's lawyer has been asking around about your military discharge. Wants to know if you've got PTSD issues on record." They're building a mental competency case? That's what it smells like. But here's the interesting part. Martha's daughter did some digging on Chelsea. Turns out our festival organizing neighbor has been sued for fraud twice in Colorado. Both cases settled out of court with sealed records. I sat on my porch that night, listening to coyotes howl in the distance and thinking about patterns. Chelsea's strategy was becoming clear. Isolate the target, control the narrative, then present herself as the reasonable party dealing with an unstable neighbor. It was a good plan, professional, systematic. Exactly the kind of psychological operation that works on people who don't recognize they're being manipulated. Unfortunately for Chelsea, I'd spent 6 years studying insurgency tactics in places where psychological warfare was literally life and death. I knew how to spot manipulation, how to document harassment, and most importantly, how to let an enemy defeat themselves by overcommitting to a bad strategy. Chelsea wanted to paint me as unstable? Perfect. Unstable people do unpredictable things. The game changer came from an unexpected source, my own security system. I'd installed trail cameras around my property after the midnight tire tracks incident, expecting to catch Chelsea's people snooping around my workshop. Instead, I caught something much more valuable. Thursday night, 2:47 a.m., crystal clear footage of a pickup truck dumping something near my creek. Friday morning, I hiked down to investigate and found them. Dozens of black contractor bags filled with construction waste, concrete chunks, old shingles, paint cans, drywall scraps. The chemical smell hit me before I could see what was leaking into my creek, turning the clear water slightly cloudy downstream from the contamination. But the real evidence was still in the truck bed when I tracked the tire patterns back to Willowbrook Estates. Saturday morning, while Chelsea was at her farmer's market booth selling artisanal honey, bought wholesale from Arkansas, I followed the trail. The truck belonged to J&M Construction, the same company that had been dumping gravel on my property. More importantly, their work trucks were parked behind Chelsea's house, and her construction dumpster was completely empty despite a full kitchen renovation that should have generated tons of waste. I spent the weekend collecting water samples from upstream and downstream of the dump site. The pH difference was obvious even to the naked eye: clear mountain water upstream, chemical-tainted flow downstream where my cattle had been drinking. When I called the county environmental office Monday morning, they fast-tracked my contamination report. Tuesday brought the real revelation. Environmental Inspector Patricia Wong met me at the creek, took official samples, and asked pointed questions about recent construction in the area. "Mr. Garrison, how well do you know your neighbor's renovation schedules?" "Pretty well. Sound carries in the hills." "Have you noticed any unusual dumping activity?" I showed her my trail camera footage. Patricia's expression went from professional interest to serious concern as she watched the midnight dump in action. "Mr. Garrison, we're looking at multiple environmental violations here. Illegal disposal of construction waste, potential groundwater contamination, and possible hazardous material release. Do you know who owns that truck?" "J&M Construction. They've been doing work for the HOA president." Patricia made notes, then asked the question that changed everything. "Have you noticed any patterns in the dumping? Frequency, timing, volume?" I pulled out my engineering notebook where I'd been documenting everything since the festival announcement. "Actually, yes. It started 3 weeks ago, right after my neighbor announced her camping event. Based on the volume of waste and the construction schedule, I'd estimate someone's been avoiding about $3,000 in proper disposal fees. Per load? Per week, for 6 weeks. Patricia's calculator app told the story. $18,000 in illegal disposal savings, plus potential environmental fines that could reach $50,000 per violation. But the timing was what made it criminal. Chelsea had been using my property as her personal dumping ground while simultaneously planning to charge people $75 to camp on contaminated land. "Mr. Garrison, I need to ask you to secure this area until we complete our investigation. No foot traffic, no camping, definitely no festival activities." "How long will that take?" "EPA involvement could extend this to 60 days minimum, maybe longer if we find groundwater contamination." That afternoon, Patricia Wong returned with a team of environmental specialists, county officials, and one very nervous sheriff's deputy. They spent 4 hours collecting samples, photographing evidence, and measuring contamination spread. By evening, my property had been officially designated an active environmental investigation site with county restrictions on public access. Festival or no festival, nobody was camping on contaminated land under EPA watch. I called Rebecca Santos with the news. "Wade, this changes everything. Environmental violations trump any property dispute. Even if Chelsea had valid easement rights, which she doesn't, the county can't permit public events on contaminated land." "So the festival's dead?" "Legally dead. But there's something else. If Chelsea knew about the contamination when she advertised camping spots, that's fraud, criminal fraud, with 347 potential victims paying $75 each. I did the math. $26,025 in festival revenue collected under false pretenses for an event that was legally impossible to hold. Here's a knowledge nugget about environmental law. Pollution violations automatically trigger government authority to restrict public access, regardless of property ownership or prior agreements. Translation: even valid property rights can't override EPA safety restrictions. Chelsea Vanderbilt wasn't just trespassing on my land anymore. She was running a criminal enterprise from her kitchen counter, and the evidence was literally poisoning my creek. The best part? She'd done it all to herself. The environmental investigation gave me something I'd never expected: legal cover for what I was about to do. While Chelsea scrambled to explain why her contractor had been dumping toxic waste on my land, I began engineering the most satisfying trap of my military career. Rebecca Santos outlined the legal framework during our Wednesday meeting. Wade, as long as the EPA investigation is active, you have county backing to restrict all access to your property. That includes the road to Willowbrook Estates. All access? Legally, yes, though you'll need to provide emergency vehicle access and reasonable accommodation for residents to reach their homes. Think of it as a temporary road closure, not a siege. How temporary? Until the environmental assessment is complete. Could be 60 days, could be 6 months. Perfect. Chelsea's festival was in 8 days. I spent Thursday designing what I call the courtesy gate system. The principle was elegantly simple: one gate at the road entrance to my property, one gate at the exit point near Willowbrook Estates. Electronic locks on both, controlled by a single remote system from my phone. Basic engineering, maximum psychological impact. The entrance gate was purely decorative. I wanted festival goers to feel welcome driving onto my land. Wide opening, fresh paint, even a hand-carved wooden sign reading, "Welcome to Wade's Ranch, enjoy your stay." The kind of rural hospitality that makes city folks take selfies and feel good about their authentic country experience. The exit gate was a different story entirely. Heavy steel construction, concrete footings 6 feet deep, industrial-grade hydraulic system designed to support a 12,000-pound load. The kind of gate that stops drunk teenagers from joyriding through cattle fences, reinforced to stop anything short of a military vehicle attempting unauthorized exit. Friday, I drove to Austin and purchased the electronic control system from a security company that specializes in ranch applications. The salesman, Tommy Nguyen, was a former Navy engineer who understood exactly what I needed without asking too many questions. "Wade, you want something that can handle multiple vehicles but gives you complete control over timing?" "That's right. Entrance should open automatically when cars approach. Exit should require manual authorization." "How many vehicles we talking about?" "Potentially 500 cars over a weekend." Tommy whistled low and shook his head. "That's a hell of a family reunion." "You want individual control or batch processing?" "Batch. I want to be able to welcome a large group through the entrance, then secure the exit until specific conditions are met." "What kind of conditions?" "Payment authorization, trespassing resolution, environmental clearance." Tommy's grin told me he understood the subtext perfectly. "Brother, I've got exactly what you need. Military-grade proximity sensors, encrypted remote control, battery backup for power outages. System can handle 1,000 vehicles easy, and you can operate it from your phone anywhere in the county." Here's a DIY knowledge nugget about hydraulic gate systems. The secret is proper concrete foundation work, because even the best hydraulic mechanism is worthless if your gate posts shift under load. You need footings at least 6 feet deep in Texas clay, with rebar reinforcement and proper drainage. Translation: spend the extra money on deep foundations, or your security system becomes expensive yard art. Saturday and Sunday, I installed the gate system with help from Lou and his son Marcus, who runs a welding shop in town. The work was therapeutic, precision engineering with immediate practical application. The smell of welding flux and hot metal mixed with morning coffee as we worked through the weekend. The familiar sounds of construction echoing across my peaceful valley. Lou held the steel posts while I welded the support brackets. "Wade, you sure about this plan?" Chelsea's been using my land as her personal dumping ground for 6 weeks while selling tickets to a festival she knows can't legally happen. I'm not trapping anybody. I'm just controlling access to my own property until they resolve their trespassing situation. How are they going to resolve it? Same way Chelsea should have resolved it 3 months ago, by asking permission, paying fair compensation, and treating my property with respect. But Marcus tested the hydraulic system Sunday evening, watching the massive steel gate slide shut with mechanical precision. "Uncle Wade, this thing could stop a semi-truck. You planning to park the entire festival inside your property?" "Marcus, I'm planning to give folks exactly what Chelsea promised them. An authentic Texas Hill Country experience. Sometimes that includes learning about property rights the hard way." Monday morning, I called the county environmental office and spoke with Inspector Wong. "Patricia, I wanted to confirm the access restrictions for my property during the investigation." "Mr. Garrison, you're authorized to control access as needed to preserve the investigation site. Emergency vehicles need accommodation, but recreational access is completely at your discretion." "What about people who are already on the property when I need to restrict access? As long as you're not creating immediate physical danger, property owners have broad latitude to manage access. You could require visitors to sign liability waivers, pay exit fees, or wait for official clearance." Tuesday, I installed the final piece of my system, a large electronic sign at the entrance gate. Solar-powered, LED display, programmable from my phone, the kind of sign that announces community events, road closures, or special notices to approaching vehicles. Wednesday morning, I programmed the sign's message. "Welcome to Environmental Investigation Site. Camping prohibited. Exit authorization required. Questions call 512-555-0147. That phone number went straight to Rebecca Santos's office. Chelsea's festival was in 3 days. She had 400-plus people planning to camp on EPA-restricted land, accessed through a gate system she didn't know existed, controlled by someone she'd spent months trying to destroy. Time to find out how much she really knew about authentic Texas hospitality. By Wednesday, Chelsea realized her festival was in serious trouble. The environmental investigation had made local news, and I'd started getting calls from concerned ticket holders asking about refunds and whether the event was still happening. Chelsea's response was pure desperation disguised as legal strategy. Thursday morning brought a sheriff's deputy to my door with a temporary restraining order. Chelsea had filed an emergency court motion claiming I was weaponizing environmental regulations to interfere with her legitimate business activities. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The woman who'd been poisoning my creek was accusing me of environmental manipulation. Deputy Mike Henderson, no relation to Jake from the hardware store, served the papers with an apologetic expression that told me everything about how the local law enforcement viewed this situation. "Wade, I gotta deliver this. But between you and me, this whole situation smells fishier than week-old catfish." The restraining order required me to cease all interference with lawful access to Willowbrook Estates and specifically prohibited installation of new barriers or security measures. Problem was, my gate system was already installed and operational. The order couldn't unbuild what was already built, and it certainly couldn't override EPA restrictions on contaminated land. I called Rebecca Santos immediately. "Wade, this is amateur legal work. You can't get a restraining order to stop someone from securing their own property during an active EPA investigation. We'll have this dismissed by tomorrow morning, but it shows how desperate Chelsea's getting." But Chelsea wasn't done with her illegal tactics. That afternoon, I caught her red-handed trying to bribe County Inspector Dave Martinez behind the feed store. I'd gone to pick up mineral blocks for my cattle when I heard familiar voices around the corner of the building, speaking in hushed tones that immediately raised my suspicions. "Dave, I understand you've got bills to pay, kids in college, $5,000 cash to find some code violations on Wade's property, something that would require him to remove those gates." I pulled out my phone and started recording, grateful for the clear acoustics that old metal buildings provide. "Ma'am, what you're suggesting is illegal. I'm going to have to report this conversation. Nobody has to know about our little chat. 10,000. Final offer. Think about what that money could do for your family." The sound quality was perfect, every word crystal clear, including the rustle of what sounded like cash being counted. Chelsea had just committed attempted bribery of a public official, and I had it all documented on video with timestamp verification. Dave Martinez found me in the parking lot 20 minutes later, looking shaken and angry. "Wade, I need you to know that woman just tried to bribe me to fabricate code violations against your property. Offered me $10,000 cash to lie about safety issues with your gate system. I know, Dave. I recorded the whole thing. His weathered face lit up like Christmas morning. You got that on tape? Brother, you just handed the county attorney a gift. We've been suspicious about some of Chelsea's building permits for months. This gives us grounds to investigate her whole operation. That evening, Dave called me with more news that made the pieces fall into place. Wade, we pulled Chelsea's HOA building records going back 3 years. She's been approving construction projects without proper permits, taking kickbacks from contractors, and falsifying inspection reports. Your bribery recording was the missing piece we needed to build a case. Here's a financial knowledge nugget about public corruption. Attempting to bribe a government official is a felony that carries automatic prison time, asset forfeiture, and permanent loss of any business licenses or professional certifications. Translation: Chelsea had just bet her house, her freedom, and her future on shutting down my gates, and she was about to lose everything. Friday brought the media circus Chelsea had been threatening, but not the way she expected. A reporter from Austin showed up asking about the troubled veteran blocking community access, clearly having been fed Chelsea's narrative about unstable neighbors and unreasonable property restrictions. But instead of the story Chelsea expected, I handed them copies of the EPA contamination report, the expired easement documents, and most importantly, the bribery recording that proved this wasn't about property rights. It was about covering up environmental crimes. Mr. Garrison, are you saying the HOA president has been illegally dumping toxic waste on your land while selling tickets to camp on contaminated property? I'm saying the evidence speaks for itself. People can decide whether they want to trust someone who thinks bribing public officials is normal business practice. The story that aired Friday night wasn't about a troubled veteran. It was about environmental crimes, real estate fraud, and public corruption. Chelsea's phone started ringing with angry festival goers demanding refunds and threatening their own lawsuits. But Chelsea had one more card to play, and it was the stupidest move of her entire criminal career. Saturday night, less than 12 hours before her festival was supposed to start, she took bolt cutters to my entrance fence and posted on Facebook. Community access restored. Festival proceeds as planned. Bring your camping gear and your cameras. Don't let one bitter man destroy our community celebration. My trail cameras caught her cutting the fence at 2:30 a.m., wire cutters sparking in the LED lighting I'd installed for security. When I checked my phone at dawn, I had video evidence of criminal trespassing, destruction of property, and conspiracy to commit fraud, all time-stamped and documented in high definition. I called Sheriff Lou with the footage. Wade, that woman just committed 3 felonies on camera. Festival or no festival, she's going to jail today. Chelsea had finally pushed too far. In less than 6 hours, 500 cars would be driving onto my property for an illegal festival on EPA-restricted land, and their host was about to be arrested for bribery, environmental crimes, and destruction of property. Time to spring the trap that would teach an entire community about the importance of respecting other people's property rights. Festival morning arrived with the sound of car doors slamming and excited voices echoing across my property like an invasion force setting up camp. At 7 a.m. sharp, Chelsea led the first wave of vehicles through my cut fence, directing traffic like a general commanding troops while wearing a bright yellow festival coordinator t-shirt that made her look official to the arriving families. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee that tasted like victory as car after car streamed onto my land through the entrance I'd designed to welcome them. The irony was beautiful and bitter. Chelsea had spent months painting me as unstable and dangerous, warning people about the troubled veteran who might snap at any moment. But here she was leading 500 families onto the property of the dangerous man she'd been warning everyone about. Either I wasn't dangerous or she was willing to sacrifice her customers for her revenge fantasy. By 8:30, I counted over 300 vehicles parked in my meadows where I'd planned to plant wildflowers. Families were setting up tents, kids were running toward my creek with fishing poles, and someone had started grilling breakfast sausage that filled the morning air with smoky richness. It looked like a normal camping festival, except for the bright yellow EPA restriction signs that nobody seemed to be reading. Chelsea was everywhere at once, directing parking, solving disputes about camping spots, playing the perfect hostess to her paying customers while taking selfies for social media documentation of her triumph. She'd even hired a bluegrass band that was setting up near my workshop, their sound check mixing banjo chords with children's laughter as more cars kept arriving in steady streams. The festival goers seemed genuinely excited. I could hear fragments of conversation carried on the morning breeze. Look at those authentic cattle, and the kids are going to love this creek. and much better than those crowded state parks. These were good people who'd been deceived by someone they trusted to organize a legitimate event. At 9:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Sheriff Lou. EPA agents on scene, news crews 10 minutes behind them. You ready for the show? I was more than ready. I'd been ready since the first time Chelsea ignored the word no and decided my property was hers to control. At 9:30, I activated the exit gate system from my phone with a simple swipe and tap. The steel barrier slid shut with a satisfying hydraulic hiss that nobody heard over the festival noise, camping chatter, and bluegrass music. 500 cars were now parked on private property during an active EPA investigation, with their only exit controlled by the man their host had spent months trying to destroy. The first person to discover the problem was a family from Dallas trying to leave early because their baby was sick and crying. I heard the father's confused voice carrying across the meadow. "Honey, this gate won't open. There's some kind of keypad, but I don't know the code." Word spread quickly through the camping area like wildfire through dry grass. The sound of car engines starting mixed with increasingly agitated voices as people realized they couldn't leave. Parents were calling to each other across camping sites, asking if anyone knew how to operate the exit gate. By 10 a.m., a crowd had gathered at the steel barrier, pressing buttons, pulling on bars, and taking pictures of the keypad system they couldn't understand. Chelsea arrived at the gate in full panic mode, her perfect festival coordinator composure finally cracking under pressure. She'd spent months orchestrating this event as her victory lap over the troublesome neighbor, and now her customers were trapped on the property of the man she'd been calling dangerous and unstable. "Wade!" she screamed across my property, her voice cracking with desperation. "Open this gate right now! You can't hold these people hostage!" I walked slowly toward the crowd, taking my time, enjoying the sound of gravel crunching under my boots and the morning sun warming my face. 500 very confused festival goers and one very desperate HOA president were waiting for me to explain their situation. "Morning, folks. I'm Wade Garrison, and this is my property. Seems you've got yourselves a little situation here." A man in a University of Texas t-shirt stepped forward as the unofficial spokesperson. "Sir, we paid for camping spots. We just want to take our families and leave." "I understand that, and I sympathize with your situation. Unfortunately, you're currently on EPA-restricted land during an active environmental investigation. Camping is prohibited by federal order, and exit authorization requires certain conditions to be met." "What conditions?" Chelsea demanded, her voice shrill enough to scare cattle. Before I could answer, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air, growing louder as they approached. The news crews had arrived right on schedule, followed by white SUVs with EPA logos on the doors and county sheriff vehicles with red and blue lights flashing. My peaceful morning was about to become a very public spectacle that would teach an entire community about the consequences of ignoring property rights, environmental laws, and the simple word no. Sheriff Lou's patrol car pulled up behind the growing crowd, and he stepped out with a grim expression and a folder full of arrest warrants that would finally bring justice to this months-long harassment campaign. "Chelsea Vanderbilt, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a public official, criminal trespassing, destruction of property, and environmental violations." The look on Chelsea's face as Lou read her rights was worth every sleepless night she'd caused me. But we weren't done yet. The best part was still coming. The scene that unfolded over the next hour was better than anything I could have engineered in my wildest dreams of justice. News helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures, their rotor wash stirring up dust that sparkled in the morning sunlight while reporters in the aircraft filmed the chaos below. EPA officials in white hazmat suits were collecting soil samples from my contaminated creek while 500 festival goers watched from behind my steel exit gate, finally understanding they'd been scammed. Chelsea sat in the back of Lou's patrol car, her perfect makeup running down her face in black streaks, while reporters interviewed confused campers who were slowly realizing they'd paid $75 to camp on EPA-restricted contaminated land during an environmental investigation. "Ma'am, did you know this property was under EPA investigation when you bought your camping permit?" "Nobody told us anything about environmental contamination. We just wanted a nice weekend in the country with our kids. Now we're trapped and our children are asking why we can't go home." Rebecca Santos arrived at 10:30 with a briefcase full of documents and a smile that could power the whole county. She'd driven down from Austin specifically to handle the media circus and represent my interests in what was about to become a very public legal education about property rights, environmental law, and criminal fraud. At 11 a.m., with news cameras rolling and EPA officials providing official backing, I gave the press conference of my lifetime on my own front porch with my coffee mug in hand. Folks, my name is Wade Garrison, and this is my private property. 3 months ago, Chelsea Vanderbilt announced a camping festival on my land without my permission, my knowledge, or any legal right to do so. When I told her no, she launched a systematic campaign to steal my property through fraud, intimidation, and environmental crimes. I held up the expired easement documents, crisp and official in the morning light. These papers prove that Willowbrook Estates has no legal right to use my road. They've been trespassing for 4 years without any valid agreement. Next came the EPA contamination report with its damning test results. These official documents show that Chelsea's construction company has been illegally dumping toxic waste on my property for 6 weeks while she was simultaneously selling camping permits for this same contaminated land. Finally, the bribery recording that had sealed her fate. And this audio recording proves that when legal intimidation failed, Chelsea tried to bribe county officials to fabricate violations against my property to force removal of my security systems. The crowd of trapped festival goers was getting restless in the Texas heat. Kids were crying, adults were demanding answers, and the morning sun was climbing toward what promised to be a scorching day. Someone in a Rangers jersey shouted the question everyone was thinking. "So when can we leave? We've got jobs to get back to." "That's an excellent question," I replied, addressing the crowd like the concerned neighbor I'd always tried to be. "Y'all are currently parked on EPA-restricted land during an active environmental investigation. Your vehicles are also trespassing on private property. Now, I could call in commercial tow trucks and have all 500 vehicles impounded at your expense. That would run about $200 per car, plus daily storage fees that add up fast." The murmur from the crowd was definitely not happy. Parents were calculating costs and looking at each other with growing panic. "Or," I continued, "we can handle this like reasonable adults who respect property rights and environmental law. Everyone who pays a $50 environmental impact fee can drive out peacefully right now. That money goes directly to creek restoration and legal fees for fighting the fraud that brought you here in the first place." A woman with 2 small children spoke up first, bouncing a crying baby while her toddler tugged on her shirt. $50 is a lot better than $200 for towing plus storage. Where do we pay?" Rebecca had set up a payment station at a folding table near the gate, complete with a card reader and receipt book. "Cash, check, or credit card accepted. Please form a single line and have your vehicle information ready." The process took 90 minutes of steady traffic. One by one, cars full of sheepish festival goers paid their exit fees and drove away, many of them stopping to apologize for trespassing and wish me luck with the environmental cleanup. Several people asked for my contact information, wanting to help with creek restoration or simply to follow the legal case against Chelsea. The best moment came when a lawyer from San Antonio approached the payment table. "Mr. Garrison, I've been following this situation for the last hour. What Chelsea did to you was systematic fraud and harassment. If you're interested in filing a civil lawsuit for damages, I'd be happy to represent you pro bono. This case could set important precedents for property rights." By 1 p.m., my property was empty except for EPA officials, news crews, and piles of trash that 500 people had left behind like evidence of their passage. The silence felt golden after months of Chelsea's psychological warfare and the morning's chaos. A reporter from Channel 8 asked for a final comment as the last news truck prepared to leave. Sometimes respecting the word no is a lot cheaper than learning property law the hard way. Chelsea Vanderbilt could have avoided all this by simply asking permission instead of assuming my land was her personal playground. Now she's facing federal charges, and her victims learned an expensive lesson about trusting people who don't respect other people's property. That soundbite would go viral by evening, shared thousands of times by people who dealt with their own versions of entitled neighbors, corrupt HOAs, and property disputes. The aftermath moved faster than I'd expected, like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. By Monday morning, Chelsea was facing 5 federal charges: environmental violations, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud, attempted bribery, and racketeering under organized crime statutes. The FBI had seized her bank accounts, her house was in foreclosure proceedings, and the HOA board had voted unanimously to remove her as president and ban her from all future community involvement. The emergency settlement came Tuesday afternoon in Rebecca's Austin office. Rather than face additional criminal exposure and a jury trial that would have destroyed her completely, Chelsea's insurance company agreed to pay $85,000 for environmental cleanup, plus $15,000 in punitive damages for the months-long harassment campaign. My creek restoration project was fully funded, and I had enough left over to upgrade my gate system and build the workshop extension I'd been planning. But the real victory was watching the Willowbrook HOA transform under new leadership that actually understood how communities should function. The incoming board president, Martha Fleming, knocked on my door Thursday morning with a thermos of coffee and a genuine apology that you could hear in every word. Wade, we had no idea what Chelsea was doing behind the scenes. The board reviewed all her financial records going back 3 years, and she'd been skimming HOA funds for personal use. We owe you more than an apology. We owe you respect and fair treatment. Martha, all I ever wanted was for people to respect my property lines and ask permission before using my land. That's not unreasonable. About that, we'd like to negotiate a proper easement agreement, fair compensation, clear terms, and your approval on any future community events. What would that look like to you? We worked out a 20-year deal at $2,000 monthly compensation with strict environmental protections for my creek and veto power over any activities that might impact my property or peace of mind. The HOA also agreed to fund a scholarship program for rural engineering students, administered through the local community college in Sarah's memory. The environmental restoration took 6 months of careful work, but watching my creek run clear again was worth every hour of effort. EPA testing confirmed that the contamination was completely contained and removed, and my property values increased by 40% once the legal easement was properly recorded and the environmental investigation concluded. Here's a financial knowledge nugget about property rights. Legal documentation and environmental compliance can significantly increase land values, sometimes by tens of thousands of dollars. Translation: fighting for your rights isn't just about principle, it's good business. The best part was the letters I started receiving from other rural landowners dealing with similar situations across Texas and beyond. Word had spread through social media and local news about the Texas rancher who locked out 500 trespassers, and people wanted advice on protecting their own property rights against HOA overreach and predatory development. I partnered with Rebecca Santos to establish the Rural Rights Legal Fund, providing free consultations for small landowners facing similar challenges. We've helped 16 families in the first year, funded entirely by donations from supporters, and my monthly gate access fees from the Willowbrook development. My son visited for Christmas and couldn't believe the transformation in both my property and my outlook. Dad, you went from stressed-out hermit to local folk hero in 6 months. The newspapers are calling you the Gate Guardian of Texas. Son, all I did was stand up for my property rights, document everything carefully, and let the legal system work the way it's supposed to. Sometimes that's all it takes to stop a bully. These days, my morning coffee tastes better knowing that my creek runs clean, my property lines are respected, and my gates open only for people who ask permission first. The hydraulic system still works perfectly, though now it mostly opens for delivery trucks, school groups learning about environmental restoration, and the occasional reporter writing follow-up stories about property rights victories. Chelsea served 18 months in federal prison and moved back to California after her release. I heard through the grapevine that she's working at a yoga studio now, probably telling people about her authentic rural experience in Texas without mentioning the environmental crimes and federal prison time. Every spring, I plant wildflowers in the meadow where 500 cars were parked that chaotic morning. The bees love them, and the honey I harvest tastes like justice with just a hint of mesquite sweetness. Next week, I'll tell you about how a retired librarian in Ohio used municipal water codes to stop a Dollar General from destroying her historic neighborhood. Because sometimes the best defense against corporate bullies is a thorough understanding of local regulations and the courage to use them. If you've got your own HOA nightmare story, share it in the comments below. I read every one, and some of these stories might just inspire future episodes. And if this story motivated you to research your own property rights or stand up to an entitled neighbor, hit that subscribe button for more tales of underdogs fighting back against corruption and winning. Remember, good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes a locked gate with proper legal documentation makes even better ones. Until next time, keep defending your property rights, and never let anyone tell you that no isn't a complete sentence.